Okay, good evening. Thank you for joining. Okay, so this week is a special week. It's Parshas Vayetze. It's the beginning of the month of Kislev. And let's see if we can find a really good, uplifting message for all of us right now from the Parsha. So, right now, whether we're living in the land of Israel, the Jews in the land of Israel, under the duress of war, their brothers, husbands, sons are in the battlefield. Hopefully and definitely they're all coming home. Whoever passed away, his soul should have a great ascent and should come back down here very quickly. But whoever is, thank God, alive and intact at this moment, should come back safely. But there is the tension. There's the tension still of rockets. There's the tension still of Hezbollah. It's war. And war creates a lot of tension and fear and definitely discomfort and anxiety. And then there's a certain war that's a global war. There's a global war. Jews feel a little, Jews feel the anti-Semitism. Millions of people across the world that won't hesitate to confront Jewish people wherever they are with all kinds of ridiculous, insane insults and attacks and protests, confrontations, and all that stuff. So we feel like we're faced with a very vibrant enemy, which again is tense. So here's the calming teaching. We are in the month of Kislev. And the month of Kislev in the last about 280 years, I don't have exactly the date right now, but about 280 years, is been a month of redemption. Because that's when we had, beginning with a redemption that is connected to the ultimate redemption and the complete redemption and the redemption from all constraints and from all opposition, from all forces of constriction, from all forces of war. That's the redemption. Where did it begin? It began with the Alter Rebbe, Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the first Rebbe of Chabad, who was in prison for 53 days with a very, very serious and vile accusations against him, which were all, of course, bogus. And he was sitting in jail in Russia with a threat of capital punishment. And of course, it threw the entire Hasidic movement in disarray and caused everybody to panic. And yet, what happened? Amazingly, the miracle happened in the month of Kislev, the 19th of Kislev, coming up, not this week, but the following week, Shabbos. We're going to celebrate the liberation of the Alter Rebbe from his imprisonment. Now, when the Alter Rebbe was redeemed when he was released from prison, and the whole accusation fell apart, and the Russian government that was accusing that was holding him in prison turned around and gave him tremendous assistance. They became huge supporters of his. So not only didn't it harm, but it actually intensified his holy work. So this happened in 1798, so you can figure out the time. In 1798, 1898, 1998 was 200 years. And then, no, it's less than 250 years. I'm sorry. I'm saying 280 years. It's 98 plus 2 is 23. Oh, so it's 225 years. 225 years ago, the Alter Rebbe was redeemed on the 19th of Kislev. Now, when he was redeemed, tradition, and he writes this in a letter, the Rebbe writes this, the Alter Rebbe wrote it, that he was redeemed when he was saying the verse in Tehillim. The verse is in chapter 54 in Tehillim, Psalm 54, where David HaMelech, King David says, Pada b'shalom nafshi, God, you have redeemed my soul in peace. King David had all kinds of people that were pursuing him. He was always persecuted. And King David and David HaMelech announces, Pada b'shalom nafshi, God, you redeemed my soul in peace. The Alter Rebbe being the great leader of the Jewish people. So his redemption wasn't only a private affair, it was the redemption of the leader of the Jewish people, which then enabled the movement of Chabad Hasidism, which is the most, as we discussed today in the earlier class, Key to Redemption, the most pivotal and powerful and most effective Jewish organization, if you might say, movement in the world that has the most impact on the Jewish people and on observance and on furthering the world to the redemption through its incredible teachings of Jewish mysticism and setting the trends for the rest of the Jewish people to follow. Although not everybody sees themselves as Chabad Hasidim, but if you take a look at the trends, you see that all the things that the Chabad Rebbes have initiated, years after they initiated, the rest of the world follows suit. And everybody starts doing the things that the Rebbe encouraged, that Chabad Hasidim encouraged. For instance, now, no one thought of in earlier times that we reach out to those that are secular or refer to themselves or see themselves as secular while they're still being secular to start doing mitzvahs. No one thought of it. But the Rebbe was the one who started that at the 6-Day War when he initiated that we should put on tefillin with the soldiers and with everybody to have extra protection. And then years later, every said body in the Jewish world is busy making tzitzis, the fringes on the garments, and giving it to all the chayalim, to all the soldiers, not asking whether you're religious or you're not. You're ready to become religious? No, everybody's doing it. Because the trends that the Chabad Rebbe set become the trends of all the Jewish people, sometimes sooner or later. Not even knowing that they're following a Chabad trend. It just becomes natural because it becomes so much part of Judaism. It becomes so much, why? Because they're the trailblazers, because they're the leaders, the true leaders of the Jewish people. So when the Alter Rebbe was redeemed, it wasn't a personal redemption. It was a redemption for the Jewish people. Now, therefore, and it's connected to the Mashiach. That's why it's connected to King David, who was the forebearer of Mashiach. And King David had many opposition. David HaMelech had many oppositions that were trying to destroy him, because these were the forces, that anti-Mashiach forces that are already working 3,000 years ago to stop the redemption. They want to extinguish or put out or destroy the seed of the ultimate redemption. So they're fighting against David HaMelech. And David HaMelech, God comes to his assistance and he has a redemption. So when the Alter Rebbe is saying that very same verse of King David's redemption, he's redeemed. Because it's that energy. It's the redemption of the kingdom of David, of Malchus Beis David. So it's therefore the redemption of the whole world. It's another step of redemption leading up to the ultimate redemption. Because the things come in it's all a process. It all comes in it evolves. Right? Part by part, stage by stage. So why is that so exciting now? Other than it's the month of Kislev. This year is Tavshin Pei Dalet, 5784, which the letters that spell this year, Pei Dalet, are the first two letters in the word Pada b'shalom, redemption and peace. The Jewish people are definitely standing right now at the cusp of the redemption. And the dynamics are here for the redemption to fully trigger literally within the seconds. We are in the hot zone right now. And when we're coming in the month of Kislev, we are literally in the inner moments of the most opportune time for the redemption to just blow up in front of us. It can happen like this in a second. So that's the general energy of the month of Kislev. Now, more particular pertaining to this week, that's going to be next week. I'm sure we're going to talk about a lot more about this. The connection of Pada b'shalom to this year, which is the year of Pada b'shalom, Pei Dalet. But more specifically, and more particularly, this week is another Pada B'Shalom. The successor of the Alter Rebbe, his son, Reb Doiv Ber, known as the Mittler Rebbe, has two important days which we commemorate this week. The 9th of Kislev and the 10th of Kislev, Wednesday and Thursday. Tonight is the eve of the 8th of Kislev. Tomorrow night will be the eve of the 9th of Kislev. So Tuesday night going to Wednesday. The 9th of Kislev, which is the 9th day of the 9th month, is in itself very special. So the 9th day of Kislev is the Yartzeit. It's the birthday. It's the Yartzeit, the day of the passing, and the birthday of the Mittler Rebbe. He's one of the few tzaddikim who the sages say about very, very great righteous people that they're born and they pass away on the same day. Because their Yartzeit is on the day of their birth, which shows on a certain perfection, that they're so perfect that everything about them is perfect. So their lives are perfect to the T. They're born and pass away at the same day. Moshe Rabbeinu was a tzaddik like that. He was born and passed away on the same day. The Mittler, from all the Chabad Rebbes, from all the 9 Rebbes, including the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid, the only one who has that openly and visibly is the Mittler Rebbe, second Chabad Rebbe, born and passes away on the same day. So that's the 9th of Kislev. This year it's extra special. Just on that, because the Mittler Rebbe was born in the year Taf Kuf Lamed Daled, which is the year 5534. Corresponding to the year 1773. That's when he was born. So what is special about that? It's 250 years. So that's a quarter of a millennium. It's a significant chunk of time. 250 is a very significant number. Especially related to a soul. A soul is called Ner, a lamp. Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, the lamp of God. A soul comes to illuminate the world. Ner is Gematria 250. So the Mittler Rebbe's lamp is shining in the world 250 years. So this is in other words, every birthday is special. But we know we commemorate special birthdays. This is a momentous birthday of the Mittler Rebbe. This 250 years of the birth of the Mittler Rebbe. It's 196 years. He passed away very young when he was 54 years old. He passed away in the year Taf Kuf Peiches, 5588, 1827. 196 years ago. That's the 9th of Kislev. What's the 10th of Kislev? The next day, which is going to be Thursday. That is the day of the Mittler Rebbe's liberation. Because just like his father was arrested by the Tsarist Russian government, on false libels lodged against him, and he was proved innocent, and his day of his liberation turns into a great festive holiday. The same is also his son, like father, like son. The Mittler Rebbe was also arrested. Same time of the year like his father, Sukkot time. And his arrest was much, much lighter than his father's, because the family, the Alter Rebbe, had already gained tremendous respect by the Tsars and by the Russian officials due to the fact that he was pivotal in the war against Napoleon. The Alter Rebbe played a major role. Spiritually, forget about it. Spiritually, the Alter Rebbe was the one who literally defeated Napoleon. That's spiritually, but even physically, that the Tsar and his people can see, the Alter Rebbe and his Hasidim assisted the Russians in repelling the attack of Napoleon and managed eventually to push Napoleon out of Russia. The Alter Rebbe paid for that action with his life because he had to run away from Napoleon, and as a result of that, he passed away. But because of that, this family became a family. They were notarized as champions, as heroes in Russia. So his son got, even when they arrested him, got very preferential treatment. Of course, there had to be a lot of back screen, what is it called, lobbying. But in the end, first of all, they didn't put him in a jail. They kept him they did put him in a jail, but they held him in a place where he had a very comfortable quarters. Not only that, he was allowed to have every day 10 people with him for minyan. For the 3 times of the day, he davened with a quorum. Twice a week, they allowed 50 Hasidim to come in so he can say Hasidus in front of them. Because the doctor, there's a very high official, a doctor who was very close to the government officials, managed to convince them that to the Mittler Rebbe, every prisoner is allowed food. You can't cause a prisoner to die. He convinced them that the food, the sustenance of the Mittler Rebbe, is literally his nourishment is the Hasidus that he says. If he can't teach and can't teach the teachings of Hasidus, he can't live. He lives by teaching and pouring and downloading the deepest secrets of the Torah. As anybody knows, there are 7 Chabad Rebbes. The Mittler Rebbe's teachings are the most expansive. They go on and on and on and on. It's like he corresponds to the attribute of Bina. Bina means understanding, the broadness of Bina. It's like crazy, the gush of knowledge that comes from the Mittler Rebbe's writings. So, but still it was an arrest. He was released on the 10th day of Kislev, 197 years ago, a year before his passing. Of course, it was therefore celebrated as a huge, joyous occasion for the thousands of Hasidim in Russia. The day, however, is not marked it's marked by Hasidim as a Yom Tov. It doesn't have the prominence of the 19th of Kislev, which happens 9 days later. This is the 10th of Kislev. 9 days later, you have the Alter Rebbe's redemption. The Alter Rebbe's redemption is far well known and celebrated with greater celebrations. That's only because the first year the Mittler Rebbe's celebration would have taken place a year later. He passed away the day before. So the Hasidim were all in mourning. So the Yom Tov did not take off on the first year. And it must have been a little bit of a bitter taste till the second year and third year, till the people can, move on to the Tzemach Tzedek, who was the next Rebbe. But with the, so it kind of dampened the enthusiasm and the excitement. So the holiday is not, what's it called again? It's not celebrated with the same shturim, as you say, with the same commotion like his father's holiday, but not that it's any less spiritually. So it comes out on the 10th day which is this week, Thursday. And that's what we'd like to talk about today. What's the relationship of the Mittler Rebbe's redemption to this week's Torah portion, Parshas Vayetze? Because in all the years, it always comes out either in the middle of the year, middle of this week, during the week of Parshas Vayetze, this auspicious day, the 9th and the 10th day of Kislev. Or it's possible for it to come out next week, in the Torah portion of next week, which is Parshas Vayishlach. But in those cases, the Shabbos that's before it is Parshas Vayetze, and we know that Shabbos extends its influence on the whole following week. Now, there must be a deep connection. So let's try to read the Torah portion and read it with the appreciation of the redemption. In other words, to see the redemptive element in Parshas Vayetze and how this Torah portion carries within it the theme of redemption and the redemption of the Mittler Rebbe, and therefore the redemption of the Jewish people. Now, strikingly, this is important. We're talking about the year 84 this year. Again, the Hebrew year this year is 5784. First 2 letters of Pada. It so happens to be by divine providence, because nothing is a fluke, nothing is accidental, that the Mittler Rebbe, when he was released, was on a Sunday. By the way, before to note, parenthetically, We were explaining why this year is very special. It's 250 years of his birth. Wednesday, the anniversary. Well, the year the Mittler Rebbe was born was on a Wednesday. Same like this year, Wednesday. And the year that he passed away, which was also on Tes Kislev, was also Wednesday. So this year is like really rooted. In other words, the energy of the Mittler Rebbe's birth and redemption is very, very, very strong this year. Sorry, birth and his passing and his yahrzeit. However, his redemption came out on a Sunday, not on Thursday like this year. It came out on a Sunday. Because every year the setting up of the calendar comes out different in terms of the days of the week. But what happened that Sunday? Sunday morning, the Mittler Rebbe was saying Psalms, as his father did. What do you do when you're in a situation where you need special divine assistance? You say Psalms. You say extra Tehillim. The Mittler Rebbe was saying Tehillim. And when he was saying the verse, let's see if we can guess, you redeemed my soul in peace, that's when they knocked on the door and they told him, you're ready to go. Your release papers have been signed. You can leave. When he was saying the verse, Pada B'Shalom, just like his father, which again is clear divine providence and divinely orchestrated, that this redemption is the redemption of Pada B'Shalom, connected to the ultimate redemption of the Jewish people. Pada B'Shalom, you redeemed in peace. Now it's interesting, they were both saying the same verse, but the Mittler Rebbe was saying it for a different reason than his father, meaning same reason, they were saying Psalms, but in a different recitation of Psalms. What do I mean by that? The recitation of the Mittler Rebbe was connected to the fact that Pada B'Shalom Nafshi is in chapter 54, which chapter 54 is the chapter that is said on the 10th day of the month. Tehillim is divided by the days of the month. Many have a custom every day after davening, Shachris, the morning prayers, to say a portion of Tehillim. It's divided by, I don't know who divided it, some going back many, many years, by some great tzaddik, some great mystic or whatever, who divided it. And on the 10th day of the month, 54 falls out in the 10th day. So the Mittler Rebbe was saying the daily Tehillim. When he said Pada B'Shalom, that's when it was released. His father was released on the 19th of Kislev. The 19th of Kislev is not chapter 54, it's actually chapter 90. Tefillah L'Moshe, chapter 90, very beautiful chapters then. Yoshe B'Seisrael, Yeluchun Eranina. It's all part of the chapters 90. I think from 90 till 96 or 97 is all part of 19. Why was the Alter Rebbe saying chapter 54? It seems like it was the custom of the Chabad Rabbeim to say the monthly Tehillim every day, the daily Tehillim of the month. Why was the Alter Rebbe saying Pada B'Shalom? Because in times of trouble, in times of particular angst, the Rebbes would add not just the Tehillim of the month, but add the Tehillim of the week. Because the Tehillim, the Psalms, can also be divided in 7 days. In the last couple of weeks since the war began, I made myself a little custom, and some others are doing it as well. I try to recommend it in shul that we should do it, to say every day extra Tehillim. So you go through at least once a week, you say the whole Tehillim. So by that, you do Sundays, Monday. Now, obviously, that is much more verses because you're not dividing it in 30, you're dividing it in 7. So the Alter Rebbe was redeemed on Tuesday. Chapter 54 is on Tuesday's thing. So the Alter Rebbe was saying it part of the monthly, part of the weekly division. The Mittler Rebbe was saying it because it was the monthly day. So the Rebbe says, interesting, that in many ways, the pasuk of Pada B'Shalom is more connected to the Mittler Rebbe than to the Alter Rebbe. Both of them have a redemption, but the Mittler Rebbe's redemption connection to Pada B'Shalom is even stronger because the monthly Tehillim is more connected to the day than the weekly Tehillim. For whatever reason, we're not going to get it. So this year, we're going to hit the rungs of Pada, redemption twice. We have it this week, and we're doubling up the power of redemption next week. The Padas are hitting both of them very intensely this year, because it's the year of 84 of Pada, and the Jewish people need a redemption. So let's take a look at what is the significance and what should we be expecting? Why should we be excited? In many ways, it's dark. In many ways, it's painful. So why should we be excited? So our excitement comes from the fact that let's analyze the Mittler Rebbe's redemption from the meaning that the Mittler Rebbe himself ascribes to this verse, Pada B'Shalom. The Mittler Rebbe said a discourse on the words Pada B'Shalom. It's printed in his Sefer Sharei Tshuva. And over there he has a mimer, a discourse, beginning with the words Pada B'Shalom. And his explanation is that what King David is singing about and praising God is not just that God redeemed him. You know, he had wars, he had many opposition against him, King David. Many people were persecuting him. And God rescued him, where he overcame his adversaries, he overcame his opposition. But the emphasis is not only that he was redeemed. There's many forms of redemption. The emphasis is that he was redeemed in peace. Pada b'shalom, redemption in peace. What does it mean, redemption in peace? But not for a moment. We'll see in a moment. But the main novelty over here is, number one, not only he's redeemed peacefully. Which means not only that after he was redeemed, there was peace in his life. Okay, once the enemies were slaughtered, the enemies were killed, his enemies were eliminated. Okay, there's no more opposition, so there was peace and tranquility. That's not what it means. It means that you're faced with the worst of the worst. They're coming at you. And you're terrified, you're shaking in fear because you're experiencing it's really frightening. And then suddenly, the whole situation turns instantly. While there is still an enemy, it turns into peace and tranquility. The redemption itself is without blood. It just happens peacefully. Why? Because the enemy himself lays down his arms. Doesn't have to be destroyed. The enemy himself on his own lays down his arms. Not only does the enemy, so the middle of that means Pada B'Shalom, that there's peace. The enemy concedes, surrenders without a fight. Without having to engage the enemy and fight the enemy. So the Mittler Rebbe says, and he gives an example. Where do we find something like that? King David, in his own, most of his life, didn't experience such Pada. He had it. He's singing Pada B'Shalom. He's saying this as a song. But mostly in his life, that was not the story. He had enemies, and he had to kill them. He was running after them, destroying them, and killing them. He was waging war. But the Mittler Rebbe says Pada B'Shalom is the manner in which was fulfilled primarily by King David's son, by Shlomo HaMelech. Because King Solomon was called Shlomo. Shlomo means peace. And why was he called Shalom? Because his entire reign was a reign of peace. It doesn't mean that there wasn't any Jew haters. Doesn't mean that there wasn't opposition. The world still had its share of anti-Semites. And people that, if they would be given the chance, would kill every Jew in the world, God forbid. These were alive and well in the days of King Solomon. The reason they didn't lift their hands up, because there was such an enormous awe and respect to King Solomon. He had Shlomo HaMelech. He had such a powerful persona and such a renown. His greatness, his wisdom was so powerful that no one would dare lift a finger up against him. So the enemy was subservient without battle. And that's what the Mittler Rebbe says means Pada B'Shalom. The enemy that's there. Now, you would think, what Shlomo Melech meant, in the days of King Solomon, it meant that because of who he was, after the inheritor of his father already had been victorious over the enemy, so the enemies were kind of already on the ground. When King Solomon became king, and he had such awe, and he had such a charisma, if you might say, and such a renown, that from the very get-go, his enemies would not have attempted to fight him. So there was no wars in the time of King Solomon. It doesn't say anywhere that King Solomon fought any battles. Instead, he built a temple. He built the Beis Hamikdash. So he was busy only with very, very good projects. But why? Because in his days, there was never any opposition. Not because there weren't any enemies, but that the enemies were controlled in a peaceful manner. They were neutralized, if you might say, in a peaceful manner. But here we're talking about something deeper. Because listen, let's look at the verse that King David says in his Tehillim. David HaMelech says, "Pada b'shalom nafshi, you've redeemed my soul in peace, mikravli." Mikravli, from those who are coming to do face-to-face battle with me. Meaning, David HaMelech is saying, I am facing enemies. I am facing opposition. Those who are coming, armies that are coming to fight me, people that want to kill me from all sides. King David had enemies from his own family. His own son wanted to kill him. So he has fights. He has oppositions from all over. But here's it deeper. In war itself, there's many levels of war. There are times that you fight your enemy from a distance. Today's days, like in the olden days, it was through shooting arrows. Hello, hello, hello. Hello. Am I being heard now? Still not? Oh yeah, I am. Okay, I'm back on. Okay, so I'm sorry for that. I think it was only 2 minutes, so I was talking about hand-to-hand battle. I was talking about a hand-to-hand battle, that the novelty of King David, of what David HaMelech is talking about, is that the two extremes. From you're in a situation where the enemy is attacking you face to face, he's close by. And if we can apply that to the world, let's leave Gaza for a moment. It's when we're watching, anti-Semites locally, wherever we are in our communities, popping up in our own street corners, ripping off signs of kidnapped soldiers, or standing out there protesting, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, or calling all these things, local politicians, local newspapers, local whatever. So it's not a distant, far away thing. It's like anti-Semitism in your face. That's called mikrav. It's a fierce battle. It's right in front. And yet, David HaMelech is saying, Pada b'shalom, you're redeemed in peace, my soul. So the redemption comes in peace. What does that mean? The enemy, while the enemy is the enemy, just drops the fight. Concedes. Then the Mittler Rebbe takes it further, and he says, but that's peace, but that's not, even King Solomon's peace is peace, but it's not the ultimate peace. What King David was talking about is, yes, coming from the extreme enemy, the enemy who's coming and fighting you face-to-face combat. It's the most extreme manner of war. But from that state coming to peace, what type of peace? Where the enemy who was once opposing you flips over and he becomes an adversary, becomes a supporter. The very darkness itself turns around, and those who were opposing become allies and become assistants to help. It's something that we can't even imagine happening today. Like, all these people that are so anti-Israel will suddenly have a complete turnaround. That's Mashiach. Mashiach is a world where the darkest elements of the world could suddenly, that's the miracle. That's the unbelievable transformation, godly phenomenon. That which was so dark a second before, that it was facing you with opposition, suddenly not only doesn't it fight anymore, but it becomes a supporter. Such type of peace is only going to happen. That miracle is only going to happen in the Messianic age. Because the verse says, this is a promise of God. I'm going to convert the nations. Imagine at the UN, all these lowlives that are now standing there condemning Israel are going to grab the microphones, and suddenly we don't even understand how, and suddenly speak of Israel and applaud Israel and say that Israel is the most moral, the most ethical, the nation that everybody in the world has to emulate. Imagine that happening from that very same microphones. Imagine all the thousands of kids on the colleges walking with banners to celebrate the Jews, to celebrate the Jewish people. And we wonder, how in the world did that happen? Where did it come? All that is needed is pada b'shalom nafshi. All that is needed is that this powerful power of redemption that King David was talking about already thousands of years ago, that the Mittler Rebbe is revealing, that is Messianic redemption. All we need is that to kick in. And just like no one expected October 7th to happen, and all the darkness that it brought, it came upon us with such surprise. No one in the world on October 6th would have said anything like this could have happened. And just like this, bang, the whole thing is turned over. In 1 second, we can watch a world transformed. Pada b'shalom nafshi. From a moment, a second before that, they were marching with the Palestinian scarves and with the face coverings. Doesn't make any sense, but that's Pada b'shalom. Now the Mittler Rebbe. Let me tell you about the Mittler Rebbe. Being that the Mittler Rebbe is the one who says this discourse, and then when he was released from jail, it was in a way of Pada b'shalom. So let me tell you a little bit the story of the Mittler Rebbe, and then we'll see how this is the message of this week's parsha as well. The Mittler Rebbe was the libel against him was actually, first of all, it was from Jewish people. Not only was it from Jewish people, but it was from family. There was family members of the Mittler Rebbe's family, cousins, that were involved in that libel. It started off after the Alter Rebbe passed away, Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, when he was escaping Napoleon. The Mittler Rebbe and the family escaped, and they had to run away, and they lost all of their money, whatever they had, because they left everything behind, and they escaped. So as they were running, they didn't have. After when the Alter Rebbe passed away, the Mittler Rebbe and his family, the people around them, found themselves literally penniless. He was the successor of his father. He had hundreds of Hasidim. So when the Mittler Rebbe started making his way back through the various different Russian cities and towns, the Hasidim felt honored and privileged to give the Mittler Rebbe money. So the Mittler Rebbe collected, not even collecting, the Hasidim on their own gave him significant amount of money. When the Mittler Rebbe arrived to, I think, whichever city it was that he went back to, Liadi, maybe his father's town. Mittler Rebbe later moved to Lubavitch, but initially I think he was in Liadi. He sent letters to certain individuals to say that we have money now, and I want to distribute the money for those who need it from the family of the Rebbe's household. So he notified and he wrote a number of 3,000 to 4,000 ruble or something like that he had. And he sent a letter that this money should be distributed, so they should send 3 people to help with this distribution, so that the money gets to those who need it most. It was the Mittler Rebbe's family himself and others who needed it, family members of the Rebbe's family but he didn't want to divide the money on his own. He called 3 people he wrote in this letter. One of these people, his name was Pinchas something from Shklov, from the city of Shklov. This person passed away. He didn't have any children. So his possessions went to a nephew of his. The nephew was a wicked fellow. The nephew rummaged through his uncle's stuff. He found a letter from the Mittler Rebbe saying that there's thousands of dollars, so to speak, that is looking to be distributed. So he smelled money. So literally it ended up being an extortion plot. What happened was he comes to the Mittler Rebbe and he demands from the Mittler Rebbe that he should give him part of the money. And he said, the money I know from the letter, whatever, you sent my uncle that there was money that needs to be distributed. I'm demanding you give me part of the money. The Mittler Rebbe said, go fly a kite. Who are you? And what are you asking over here for? The monies were given to those who needed it. Anyways, the guy said, if you're not going to, I'm going to get you in trouble with the authorities. That's where it all started. He teamed up with people that were jealous of the Mittler Rebbe, and together they fabricated a whole story. First of all, what they did was they took the document and they forged it. It said 300 to 400, it said in Hebrew. It said 3,000 to 4,000 ruble, something like that, 3 or 4,000. They added a kuf, making it 103,000, and added another kuf next to the dalet, and it became 104,000. So suddenly the small amount of money became a fortune. Then they were claiming that there's no way the Rebbe on a short little trip that he took through the Russian villages or little towns, was able to raise such a fortune of money unless he had a very important project. What was his project? He's trying to create a movement to overthrow the Tsar. They tried the same thing they said by the Alter Rebbe, that they want to overthrow. He's engaging in back talks with the Turkish Sultan, because Russia then was at war with Turkey, so that he's engaging and that's why, because he had such a project, that's why the Hasidim raised a ton of money, because this wasn't just support the family. This is a dark project that they're involving treason against the Russian government, planning an overthrow. And to add to that, they said that his shul, the Mittler Rebbe's shul, is the same measurement as the Holy Temple. You see that he has messianic ideas to him, and that he sees himself as the leader of the Jewish people, wanting to overthrow the government, and so on. This was the accusation that was placed. Didn't take much to get this through to whoever was going to want to listen, and that's what brought us to his arrest. And the Mittler Rebbe obviously went and had to prove all of this false, and so on and so forth. But how was his final? How did it come about? So it's very interesting. The Rebbe says that the Mittler Rebbe, the way he was redeemed was in peace. So how did it happen? All these letters and his bookkeeping of the Mittler Rebbe was all written in Hebrew. The Russians, in order to be able to translate it, needed translators who would translate it so that they can go through it. So they asked for those to translate it. Those parties involved in the false libels came to the Russians and said that you can't trust that these people are not going to translate it the way it should. Give it to us to translate. In the end, they managed to get that. They themselves translated the things, and maybe they tried to put in whatever. But the Mittler Rebbe was called to defend himself in court or whatever in front of the tribunal that was there. And the way it was said was that, you know what? Let the accusers themselves come and face to face the Mittler Rebbe, and they'll talk about the thing. So the day the Mittler Rebbe went, he dressed himself up. I guess he was in prison already, but I guess he had brought with him his Shabbos clothing. He dressed himself up in his Shabbos clothing. Now, the early Hasidic masters all wore white on Shabbos. Later, from the Rebbe Rashab, or Rebbe Marash, I think, the fourth Chabad Rebbe, this custom stopped. But the Alter Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, and in general, the students of the Baal Shem Tov wore, according to the Kabbalistic tradition, white garments on Shabbos. White, bekishes, white kapatas. And they wore shtreimel. So the Mittler Rebbe dressed himself up in white clothing like that, and when he walked, the regality that was on his face was unbelievable. The family was afraid that he would provoke the anger of the government to see him like he's walking in like that. And they were hoping that they wouldn't, but the Mittler Rebbe insisted that that's the way he's going. When he walked in, literally, all the ministers and everybody was there was shaking before him, because they were taken aback by his incredible appearance. In that setting is where they brought in the people who actually were the accusers. When they faced the Mittler Rebbe looking like that, we're talking about Pada B'Shalom, when you don't have to fight. In other words, the whole argument went down. It went down south very quickly for those who were making for the forger. And in the course of his discussion, he's arguing with the Mittler Rebbe for a little short while. He says to the Mittler Rebbe, Rebbe. So the Mittler Rebbe stops him and he tells the Russians, he calls me a liar. He's calling me a thief and a liar. And yet, right in front of you, he refers to me as Rebbe, which Rebbe means the master, the teacher. The guy started speaking
because he became so bewildered and so he was so thrown off, and it was primarily because of the appearance and the way the Mittler Rebbe appeared, that he became so thrown off by it that he started literally talking nonsense and not making any sense. To the fact that the judge or whatever it was over there got so angry and said, "You are so ridiculous, you're so insane, get out of here, you never want to see you again." So they were kicked out of court immediately. The Mittler Rebbe was vindicated. And then, of course, it was a few days later until they, came to the final verdict. But it was a complete knockout. But the way it was not in any way that there was any kind of the Russian government, of course, saw his innocence, but even the enemy himself was not defeated in some kind of a defeat. It was the Mittler Rebbe overpowered him with his presence. He came really well prepared, and he had good arguments, fake arguments, but arguments that kind of were well polished. But he couldn't even lodge them against the Mittler Rebbe because he was so taken aback by the glory. Similar to it wasn't, so it didn't end up yet like it's going to be in the days of Mashiach, that the enemy himself will become a supporter. But it was on the level of King Solomon, where the enemy was subdued not through war and not through battle, but he was silenced by the power and the awe and the righteousness and the holiness of the Rebbe. That was regarding the enemy itself. But in a sense, the Russian government's officials, they were also part of the enemies. They were the ones who imprisoned him. They became allies. And the Mittler Rebbe afterwards, not only was he able to continue his teaching of Hasidism and so on and so forth, but this very, very obstacle ended up becoming an energizer of the Hasidic movement. As we know, it added another holiday, and it added tremendous oomph in the work of Hasidism to spread godly light into the world. It gave an enormous boost to the Hasidim and to the entire Hasidic movement, just like when the Alter Rebbe was released some 25 years earlier. When the Alter Rebbe was released, it was after he was released from Petersburg. His momentum in spreading Torah and Hasidus became so much greater. Initially, they wanted to stop the teachings of Hasidus to spread. And after the Alter Rebbe was released, his Hasidus exploded in Russia, and it expanded. So the very darkness itself and the opposition was turned around and ended up being an ally and a great assistance to the movement and everything that it needed. Well, this idea literally is the idea of Parshas Vayetze, and we'll do it very briefly. If you take a look at this week's Torah portion, the entire Torah portion of Parshas Vayetze is Yaakov, our father, our third of our patriarchs, Jacob, in a hostile environment. Actually, Parshas Vayetze is the seeds of exile, of the Jewish people being in exile. Everything that happens to the children had to happen to the fathers. This long and bitter exile for 2,000 years that has not yet let go completely was initially experienced by Jacob, our father. When he has to flee the wrath of his brother Esau, who wants to kill him. His mother and father send him to go down to Lavan, to her brother Lavan. Lavan is a swindler, a cheat, a con artist like no other in the world. A very, very dangerous person, a huge magician who's using powers of black magic and all kinds of spirits, powerful spiritual energies of impurity. Anybody that falls into his hands is gone, is done with. He's a sorcerer. He's a dangerous individual. Yaakov has to go run away. He goes down to live with, and for 20 years, corresponding to our 2,000 years, he lives by his uncle Lavan. Lavan is a force trying to harm Yaakov. He's trying to harm him, like we say in the Haggadah Shel Pesach, that Lavan was more dangerous than Pharaoh. He tries to harm Yaakov all along, even though Yaakov marries his two daughters, and then the maidservants, which are also semi his daughters. He marries his 4 wives over there. Lavan is constantly trying to trick him and take him down and suck the blood out of him. So Yaakov is literally in a state of imprisonment. He's in a state during this time. It's the darkest period of Yaakov's life. Very, very challenging, very dark, and very difficult. But what's the story? When you conclude this week's Torah portion, what are you left with? You're left with scars and wounds of a 20-year ordeal of suffering. You're left with a person that can only tell you about the darkness and the horrors of their life. Or you're left with one of the greatest stories of enormous prosperity and success, where every bit of darkness that was thrown to Yaakov Avinu ended up being flipped on its head to support him. In those 20 years that Yaakov went to Haran, when he went down there, he was robbed, first of all, on the way going down. His father sent him with some means of trying to, with some wealth, so that they'll want to give their daughter for him. But he was robbed on the way. Esau's son chased after him, and he was supposed to kill him. But in the end, he didn't. To the credit of Eliphaz, he did not kill Yaakov. And he took all of his money instead. Yaakov was left without a shirt on his back. He was actually left naked. A miracle. The Midrash tells of a miracle that someone fell in the river where Yaakov stood. He stripped Yaakov of all his clothing. A rider fell into the river and drowned. And Yaakov was able to take the person's clothing and go down to Lavan. So he actually didn't have anything. And yet when he comes there, the time he got there, he was 77 years old. He left when he was 63. Gets there when he's 77, and he's going to find a wife. Then the guy tells him, his uncle tells him, you work for me for 7 years, and then you'll get married to my daughter. And then he cheats him. So by the time Yaakov is ready to marry Rachel, he's 84 years old. But in that hostile environment, look how successful he is. He manages to get married, not with one wife, but with 2 of his wives who built the Jewish people, and then 2 that became 4. And then from them, he builds up to 12 tribes. Now, he doesn't have all 12 there. He has 11 plus a daughter. So he has 12 children. 11 plus a daughter, 12 children. And they're going to be the foundations and the pillars of the Jewish people. What his father and his grandfather were not successful to do. Because his father and grandfather failed in their parenting. They had one child that was successful, one child was not. Ishmael comes from Avram, and Esau comes from Jacob, from Yaakov. Esau and Yishmael. So you're dealing with, people that were not successful in completely infusing the fear of God and the Judaism to all. Yaakov manages to have all of his children, even though they're growing up in such a harsh and un-Jewish environment, where the cards are stacked against them, where everything is threatening their spiritual well-being. Their uncle Lavan is the source of contamination, and he's trying to contaminate the children. He doesn't have any power. And not only that, next thing is Yaakov becomes a millionaire, financially successful, unbelievable. Because Lavan makes a deal with him with the sheep, and they make a whole story. In the end, Yaakov ends up extracting all the sheep from Lavan. They become his wealth. And then he takes the sheep and he's able to sell them. And the Torah relates that he makes a fortune. And anti-Semitism at that moment finally bursts out like you've never. It's literally the jealousy and the envy of the success of the Jewish people. Which a lot of it is part of the anti-Semitism. I can't say anti-Semitism is only that. But you see, it says that Lavan's children were saying that Yaakov, he stole everything from our father. He made all his success off our backs. Something that has always been said, and people say about the Jews. The Jews are successful because God made his promise to the Jewish people. And the Jewish people are a godly people. So there is a abnormal blessing of God to the Jewish people. And yes, the Jewish people have tremendous divine successes. And there's animosity. And the animosity was shown by Lavan at that time. And literally Yaakov's life is in danger. He's in a situation where literally it's bubbling around him, it's circling. The vultures are circling. The wolves, the hungry wolves, are howling as they're circling Yaakov. Yaakov knows he has to get away. He makes his escape. He leaves. Lavan pursues him with the intention to kill every single him and his entire family. It's literally mikrav li. The enemy is coming and he's breathing down his back. In other words, the situation looks like it's going to be horrible. We're dealing with a pogrom about to happen. They have their weapons drawn. But instantly, what happens? God redeems Yaakov peacefully. There is no war. Not one shot was fired. Not one bullet. What happened? Lavan has a dream where God warns him, don't you mess. Lavan comes the next day. They have a confrontation, an argument, but it doesn't take long until they break bread together. They make a covenant. Lavan wakes up the next morning and he kisses Yaakov's children, his grandchildren. The very man who the day before wasn't going to have anything less than a river of blood is now standing like a soft grandfather and blessing his children, his daughters and his grandchildren and the whole family. What happened? Moshiach. It's so amazing you can learn the whole parsha and not see it that way, but that's the parsha. You have the Jewish people in exile, filled with exile, being tremendously successful. And then this very, very prison itself ended up being the most successful time in Yaakov's life. At every level, he reached the highest levels of prosperity. The darkness itself and the prison wardens themselves became his supporters. How? The Midrash actually uses the pasuk, Pada b'shalom nafshi, on Yaakov. Mikrav li, from those who are from the wicked trying to hurt me. The Midrash says, in Parsha Ayin Gimel, it's referring to Yaakov. B'shalom nafshi, mikrav li, k'rabim ayamadu zeh Yaakov. This is Yaakov. Here you have the Mittler Rebbe and the Alter Rebbe, especially the Mittler Rebbe, whose redemption happens this week, Pada b'shalom, but that's the story of the parsha. Now, it's not over here. All the way in the end of the Torah portion, what happens? All the way in the end of the Torah portion, what happens? Yaakov is now making his way back. After they part with Lavan, okay, there's no more hatred. Now, by the way, another point how the Rebbe says how Lavan assisted Jacob, is that even his pursuit that he pursued after Yaakov, he's running after him, that itself externally looked like, from our dark exile eyes, it looks like catastrophic. God forbid, he's chasing after, he's coming. Who knows what's going to be? It was literally, this is stuff for a nightmare. But what happened in the end? The Mizritcha Magid, the Rebbe, the second Rebbe, Hasidic master, explains that the reason why he pursued was because one of the jobs that Yaakov had to do was Yaakov had to elevate all the sparks from the klipa. All the sparks that were stuck in the darkness by Lavan needed to be extracted and be elevated to holiness. Yaakov emptied out 99.5 of the sparks. The sheep of Lavan, they contained the sparks of holiness. They became Yaakov's possession. Lavan's daughters, they're part of the sparks of holiness. He takes them all out. His grandchildren would have been whoever they would have been. Now they're part of the Jewish people. So all of this is the sparks of holiness. there's a few leftover sparks that are buried so deep that Yaakov can't access them. And he has to leave without them. So what does God do? Lavan comes chasing after him. And see what the Baal Shem Tov says. The Baal Shem Tov and his student both say the same teaching. See what it was. When Lavan is pursuing after Yaakov, he was pursuing him to give him the last leftovers. He's thinking he's pursuing him to kill him. But he's really pursuing him is to give him the last sparks that Yaakov didn't. Yaakov vacuumed everything, but there's one or two little pieces of gold that are still there. So he's running after him to give him that as well. How did he give it to him? So the Baal Shem Tov says, because this story is now added onto the Torah as a story that Lavan chases after Yaakov. That means this chase of Lavan after Yaakov becomes words of Torah. That means that an energy that was once in the unholy now is transferred into the holy because it became these very verses in our holy Torah. Where did it come from? It came from a dark story and it was transformed into the words of the Torah. So that was Lavan assisting with the leftovers and bringing it. I just want you to stop for 1 second and think about the protesters out there in the colleges, shouting and marching and screaming and running to Union Station, to Penn Station, and running and making a... I just want you to think. It might not be what we think it is. This is the last seconds before the redemption. There might be a couple of things that we haven't taken yet, that have not been elevated yet. So they're marching in the streets. This is all going to be converted into holiness and godliness. And then we're going to realize that it was never, ever a exile entity. It was a redemption. Even though now it doesn't make any sense. I can't explain how it's going to turn into good. I don't know the whole story. So by Yaakov we find that after Lavan is finished, after Lavan contributed everything, he kissed the children and the grandchildren, he's transformed. Now Yaakov was the last few verses in Parshas Vayetze. He's ready to go back to the land of Israel, and he meets two sets of angels come to meet him. And he calls the place where he met them Machanayim. He calls the place, Yaakov names the place Machanayim, which means camps. And because there are two camps that converge together. Who are these two camps of angels? When Yaakov was God provides people with angels to protect us. When God sends us on missions in this world, we need to have security guards. There are spiritual powers that are protecting us. Each and every one of us in our own struggles. We have actually the Medrash Tehillim on the pasuk Pada b'shalem nafshi. The Medrash says, how does God redeem a person peacefully? There are angels that are dwelling, that surround each and every one of us to keep us safe and secure. But there are two sets of angels. When Yaakov is in the land, outside of the land of Israel, he has special angels that are called, that are part of the outside world, not part of the land of Israel. Then there are special angels for the land of Israel. So when Yaakov was coming back towards the land of Israel, the angels that were protecting him outside of the land of Israel were met by the group of angels that were coming to greet him from Israel. And now he had the two groups together, the Israeli security team and the American or the Mesopotamian security team. Together, they stood together, all angels. And Yaakov names it Machanayim. So what is the spiritual meaning of this? So the Rebbe says, first of all, number one, the fact that Yaakov is naming a place. This place where Yaakov named wasn't in Israel. It was outside of Israel. It's not our territory. The Jewish territory is the land of Israel. Outside of the land of Israel is not our territory. Yet, who is the one who names it? Yaakov. What does that show? It shows that Yaakov has authority even over the land outside the land of Israel. That means the very place that kept him a prison, he reaches such a level of success that he can rename the prison itself. He can call it with the name that benefits him. And then the angels which are the result of all the actions that we do in the time of exile. All the mitzvahs that we do all creates angels. These angels all come together at the conclusion of our work, at the end of the exile. This is the story. We have to see Yaakov's story not as a story of himself, but as a story of the Jewish people. At the end of the exile, we collect all the good deeds that we've done with all the billions of angels. And all of them come together to form a massive camp. And then what does Yaakov do with these angels in the beginning of next Torah portion? He sends them as to Esav, which means a Jew has all these angels at his or her disposal. What does all this mean? What does this all mean practically? It means that we are standing right now, and at our service are the billions of angels that the Jewish people have created throughout the entire exile. Imagine that. They're all gathered together. Is anybody still scared after this talk? What are you afraid of? The billions of angels are here. The Jewish people are completely, right now. Where's this running? The Jewish people are surrounded by billions of angels right now that are at our disposal because Yaakov becomes the master. The Jew masters over the angels as well. And from the fact that Yaakov called the place his town, meaning the success that the Jewish people have had during this long exile is to actually name the places of the world. That means what we're saying over here is, God forbid that we should feel weak. God forbid that we should for a moment think that, they still hate us. We're still in trouble. It's not over. This is still here. This is still there. Remember when it happened 70 years ago. Remember what happened then. We're still in trouble. God forbid. First of all, we got to realize like this. The Jewish people are unbreakable. We're not made up with the same stuff that the rest of the world is made out of. The rest of the world has situations where they have difficulties and hardship and whatever, and fall apart. They've fallen apart. Rome fell apart. Egypt fell apart. Persia fell apart. Powerful empires fell apart, and they're gone. Jewish people are unbreakable. And every single force and every single time they gang up and the enemy comes marching, and this is our life story. Enemies have been coming marching at us all the time. Every time what happens, it ends up in another holiday. It ends up with us richer, stronger, more influential, more effective. And eventually it's going to end up in the enormous explosion of light and goodness for the entire world. And even if we're watching a situation where it looks like we're facing swords, we're facing the daggers, we're facing face-to-face combat, remember, just like by Yaakov, Pada b'shalom. What do we need to do? We need to put on, like the Mittler Rebbe, the white bekisha. Put on our shtreimel and just shine. The Rebbe says we need to, instead of fighting, like people don't think we have to fight. I'm not saying we shouldn't do what we need to do. Write to your congressman, write to your thing, go out and march in D.C. It's all that, but that's not really where the power lies. The power lies in the fact that we go about doing our business. We go about learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, spreading the light, spreading the faith that Mashiach is about to come. We just continue doing our godly thing, like Yaakov was doing. He didn't get affected by anything. He just did his thing. All the noisemakers and the detractors in the side are going to fall. They might look big, they might look powerful. They're nobody and nothing. And that's our message from Pada b'shalom. No one should lose any sleep over it. I mean, obviously the pain that happened, the darkness that happened, and we do cry for the fallen soldiers, and we do cry for those that were, for the hostages, and we pray, but again, by the hostages as well, how could I have not spoken of? Let it be, and it is going to be Pada b'shalom. God will redeem, and he's obligated to redeem. His promises that he made to us, he must fulfill. We should see that it should all happen in front of our eyes in a very vivid way. Pada b'shalom nafshi, and we should see the full and complete redemption in this year, Pei Daled, but right now in the month of Kislev, and right now even before these holidays, so we can celebrate these holidays coming up the way they should be celebrated, in the greatest joy and in the greatest simcha. Amen.